I'm hot under the collar today, and it has to do with the last video we did about amplification. This is something I'm really passionate about, and it's not something that, I don't usually use this forum as a sort of a soapbox, but it's important to me that I share my opinion on this thing because it is such a critical part of sort of what I've worked on over the years. I don't have the best bebop vocabulary. I'm not the best soloist, I'm not the fastest, and so on and so forth. There's lots of things that I'm not good at. What I do know that I'm good at is that I have good time and a good swing feel, and I have a good sound. If there's anything that anyone has, I think, has ever said positively about me in the past, sort of consistently, it has to do with sound. It's something that I worked really, really hard on, and was the very first video I did on this channel about sound. So I put a lot of time, effort, and money, blood, and sweat into this effort of trying to get the best sound. I'm so hot today partially has to do with feeling upset at myself a little bit, to be totally honest, and also a little bit annoyed or miffed or just rubbed the wrong way with some of the discussion that was happening in the last video. One thing that sticks out is that an acquaintance, or I don't know if I say colleague, but someone that I knew in New York City who I sort of looked up to and in fact learned a particular technique from, sort of called me out, so to speak, in the comments. And I don't know if it was necessarily directly pointed at me or at sort of all of us in general, but it was about not using an amplifier at all. And part of the reason that got to me was because that has always been really, really important to me. And I'm not sure that I made it clear enough in the other video, my feelings about this, and I wanted to share them with you. You're using an amplifier. Why? Is it because other people do it? Is it because your teacher told you to? Is it because you just feel like that's just what's done? But I want you to ask yourself why. Why are you using this amplification? If this spurs on a thought to you to try something different, to consider something different about how we use this instrument in this music, I'm happy. I know I'm not going to convince everybody. That's totally fine. Everyone is entitled to their own opinions. That said, I don't think this is talked about nearly enough, especially not compared to the value that it used to have 20, 30 years ago. And I think it needs to get some kind of resurgence. So here's me spitting into the wind, trying to talk about it. Having an acoustic sound, having a naturally effective acoustic sound without an amplifier informed the way that all the masters played. Yes, Ray Brown used an amplifier. Yes, Christian McBride uses an amplifier, and so on. They still sound great because they worked on their sound without one. And I feel that the quality of my sound has to do with me working on the bass without an amplifier at all, in lots of situations where that wasn't comfortable. And that's part of the thing that I want to connect with you about, is that what I am asking and what I am suggesting is not comfortable, and in fact will require a lot of discomfort on your part in a lot of ways. That said, I do want to give an important caveat and say I understand that we need to make money. If this is part of the way you make money and somebody demands you use an amplifier, you've got to do it. I got into an argument with the pianist Eric Reed many, many years ago about this. He asked me, do you ever use an amplifier? I said, no, never. I never use an amplifier. He said, why not? I said, well, that's just not my sound, and so on and so forth. He said, well, if a leader calls you, you should use one. So we got into it about it. So there is a practical element to consider for sure. But if we want to be the best bass player we can be, I think dealing with sound has an important factor in that a lot of people are not dealing with. And I want to invite you to deal with it as well. We have to consider, are our strings high enough? Are we playing hard enough? Are we setting up our bass in such a way that allows it to be the loudest it can be? I know we talk a lot about getting a good sound and a big sound and a loud sound and whatever, but how many of us are actually pushing the envelope as to what is possible with our instrument and with our physical hands? You can go to the extreme, and as I have done, and I know others have done at times that I've spoken to about it, how high can you put the strings? Actually, like how physically high can they go? What is it like to try to play like that? What is it like to push yourself further than you think you can go? And I'm going to suggest that you do that because the benefits are great, short-term and long-term. Short-term, there's also this discomfort of You may not hear yourself as well. Your hands are going to hurt more. Others are not going to get the sound that they expect necessarily because everyone's using an amplifier. But you're going to find those pockets of people that want to play like this, that appreciate what you're doing, and most of all, you are going to be able to understand more about how you relate to the instrument and how the instrument speaks in a variety of settings with a very high setting or less than, maximum setting. I'm not saying keep it as high as it goes. I don't play as high as it can go. But really pushing your technique to try to get that biggest sound, thinking about it all the time, making it a big priority is important. I'm not advocating for not having subtlety. That is important. I'm not advocating for just simply trying to be the loudest you can be for the sake of being loud. I'm advocating for working on understanding how loud we need to be in terms of an acoustic situation and what is the best way we can fit in with an ensemble in a given situation. Just being loud for loud's sake is not the point. And just having the ability to sort of bash people over the head with it or show off in that particular way, if that's a show off, I don't know, but it again is not the point. It's so that we can be heard to the audience and to the band members acoustically and fit in with the ensemble. What you'll also find when you're not using an amplifier is that the others will tend to generally come down whether they're thinking of it or not, and it's going to have a more balanced, pleasant perspective and an experience for those on stage and for the audience. Everything sort of settles down when you don't introduce some kind of electric situation into the environment. The drums don't have an amplifier. The saxophone doesn't have an amplifier. Why do we in the background need an amplifier? That, it completely messes with the balance of the actual science of the acoustic waves that are happening in the moment. So again, I understand that this is some radical, perhaps thoughts, things you may have not heard before or considered before. But if a guitar player wasn't using an amplifier, for example, I would come down to them, right? I would understand that they would be so quiet that I would need to play teeny tiny quiet, right? And everyone else should as well. So why shouldn't other people come down to us, which is essentially the heartbeat of the whole ensemble? Why are we put in the background sonically, right? Why is it on us that we have to bring this extra, huge piece of equipment to fit in with everybody else? It's not fair. It doesn't make sense. And it's taking away from the beauty of this natural sound. As I mentioned in the other video, other folks should come down to us. They usually don't. But if you talk about it, if it's a consideration for you, if you think about it, if you try to find situations where it works and can work, or you can talk about it with the other band members and so on and so forth, it is hands down, unequivocally, I'm sorry many of you are gonna disagree with me, the best sound for the bass is the naturally occurring sound of the bass. Are you using gut strings? Have you tried gut strings? Have you tried using gut strings, putting them up high? What is that like for you? If you haven't, why not? Is it a matter of cost? I totally get that. Or is it a matter of just you haven't thought about it or you haven't got a good example of who sounds like that? The great players on records, when you work with sound very, very intensely, you can tell on a recording what kind of strings the person is using, generally, whether they're gut or steel, and how high they are and how hard they're pulling. It becomes obvious and it becomes evident and informs what you do when you understand these intricacies of the sound. So I gave a lot of suggestions in that first video about ways to help yourself naturally without an amplifier to get a big sound. And I will include that in the PDF here for this video if you want to see it for the first time or see it again, whatnot. But it has to do with putting yourself in a corner, taking the rubber end pin off the bottom of your bass. One thing I don't think I mentioned in that particular video is that sometimes if you have a sensitive drummer who understands about feathering the bass drum, so you're lightly playing the bass drum on all 4 beats, if you stand right in front of the kick drum, that actual kick drum sound can help your sound, actually. It sort of boosts your sound from behind. So that is another thing that I don't think I mentioned in that video. That said, I think it's important for us to question what our assumptions are about what we're doing with this instrument. When others listen to us, right? When there is an audience, I am also going to go out on a limb here and say that pretty much bar none, as long as you can be heard, a generic audience is going to prefer an acoustic sound over an amplified one. If you can be heard, that's part of the thing, right? I understand that being without an amplifier makes it difficult, right? If you need some kind of reinforcement, I'm always going to choose a microphone over an amplifier. It's still not the exact acoustic sound, but I have done many gigs without anything at all. And yes, I can't hear myself sometimes, but yes, when everything starts to lock in, it is, to me, an exponentially better experience. To me, this is connected to another thing that I'm hot about right now, which has to do with society and Western society and what's going on. I'm upset about it. I know a lot of other folks are upset about it. If I can put my 2 cents in this soapbox, in this moment of using a soapbox, here's how I think what's happening in our world is connected to the sound on the bandstand and the sound of the bass. What I think we're missing is a collective sense of sacrifice, and that we each need to take an individual responsibility for sacrifice and discomfort, and also a sense of us as a team, as a group, as an ensemble, somebody on stage. So a successful acoustic sound on stage is going to involve the other players, and they may have to sacrifice too something about what they want to do so that you can be heard. To me, this is really a mirror for why we're kind of in this ultimate place. Yes, there are a million other reasons, I understand that, but this is the thing I think a lot of folks aren't talking about that I see online, and I think is something to consider. And I want to invite you, if you're not already there, to just consider what sort of sacrifice can I make personally as far as trying to help make things better, and also be pushing for us as a group to sacrifice together and be thinking about a group. So, all that said, are your strings high enough? Are you testing gut strings? Are you just trying to play without an amp? Have you discussed not using an amp with your band members, and so on and so forth? Have you looked at yourself in a mirror a million times and tried to play quarter notes over and over and over again with one finger so that you feel like you can get the best and biggest sound? Have you experimented with wear on the fingerboard you're playing to get the best and biggest and clearest sound? Please understand that my goal in this whole channel is to try to help lots of people and to give lots of perspectives to lots of people. But I'm also obviously a person with my own thoughts. And this particular topic, as I say, got me a little bit passionate and hot under the collar, as you can tell. So thanks for joining me for this video today. I hope that in some way it was helpful, and look for that PDF below if it would be helpful to get a reminder about things that we can do for an acoustic bass sound. Always remember, straight ahead and strive for tone.